Hey Siri, pause. Hey Siri, pause.
Siri was liking that.
She's cranking it. Just having fun.
She's like, it's Saturday. I'm going to do whatever I want.
Well, we are.
Oh, yeah.
People might wonder, this is the John and Tara podcast. Hola.
Hey.
People might wonder why I have this gigantic thermos, because we were pouring the native root Ember River butter coffee this morning.
Which John makes into amazing butter coffee.
So this is the first time people are actually seeing us
Yeah.
with our coffee.
This is what we do. Is how
Check it. Cheers.
Teaching, baby.
I think that's the first time we've ever had a really nice ching.
That too.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn off this
I'm
fan.
getting it.
Okay, you got it.
Already.
Good, you got
I got it via Wi-Fi, baby.
the master remote.
Yeah.
Yes.
You gotta try. Trying.
I think that's a good, well, today we're talking about, this is submission class number 2.
So submissions?
Class. Yeah, submissions.
We're doing submissions.
Which we were joking the other day, or you were joking, like, this is so funny that these are actually martial arts terms as well. So,
that's true.
Last time we were talking about submitting to your relationship. And so this time we thought, why not just jump right into submitting to your husband?
Well, you brought that up.
I did.
I thought that was what we were going to talk about the first time.
Well, then you mentioned submitting to your relationship, which
I did
is,
what did you just say?
You mentioned submitting to your
relationship. Okay. You said it so fast. I was like, you mentioned submitting.
Well, which I was pleasantly surprised. It just kind of seemed to flow.
Okay.
So
it did. Submitting to your relationship was number 1 in the submission series.
Do you think it actually, I think it does belong at number 1. Would you say that
submitting
would be
to your relationship?
Number 1?
Well, that's where it is.
Yes.
That is where it is, and that's about it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So today, submitting to your husband.
Uh-oh.
I don't know. I will admit it. It's still, even though I do it, and just it's pretty natural these days. There are some times where I resist, but I still cringe. I have to
cringe?
Yeah,
Wow.
There's like an internal. It's not about you.
Okay, in what way? Okay.
So it's not about you, like I cringe or like, oh, I gotta submit to John. I think it's that, particularly in my generation, the word submission, to submit, really got a bad rap. You know, it means you're weak, you can't handle yourself. It means that you're not an equal in your relationship. It means that you don't have a valuable relationship, because why should one person, it implies that one person's higher than the other, like there's that hierarchy is bad.
Yeah, all these things get misconstrued when it comes to women, right? So
how does a guy look at it?
Do you think a guy goes to work and just tells his boss what he's gonna do and what he's not gonna do, and is just like, you asked me to do this, but you didn't say please, and I just feel like if I do this job after you asked me, I'm going to be like less of a person, because I know it needs to be done, but I'm just kind of like, I'm not feeling that we're having like an equal relationship here. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to do it.
Well, I think this is obviously, maybe not obviously, but what, I need to reason through things like this, because, and it goes back to even a couple episodes ago where I talked about, your emotions are telling you something. Okay. Yeah. So if it kind of like has an inner cringe factor, is it actually, because sometimes it's like taking your vitamins, right? And you're like, these ones taste really green, or these ones taste really fishy. I'm going to take it with some juice. I know it's good for me. And you're still like,
what if we find out that they've been lying about vitamins all along?
Oh, gosh. Well,
No, I can honestly say I could feel my vitamins working, especially when I was racing motocross. I could really feel the benefits of vitamins.
So I think maybe submission is like a good vitamin where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I know it's good for me in the situation and I'm doing it and sometimes I have to think about it, but it's still not like natural all the time.
Well, let's go back to language and the way that people are communicating. You know, the way that you're told these words that are being said to you are making you a lesser person. You know, you started out with "I cringe." Okay, now cringe is a colloquial term that is used nowadays. That is, you know, they say cringe-worthy and they say all these different things, but is it really? I mean, is it a bad word? Cringe? Does it? What is the? I don't know. You said it's cringy. I don't know the feeling that gives, but then you said it's kind of, you know, you might feel what did you say? Did you say diminished or did you say if you're submitting?
Less than.
Less than. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
No,
I mean,
diminished,
literally,
yeah.
if we're talking about words, submission, sub is under, right? And
Yeah.
so it does literally mean that. And
Well, everybody's under something. You know, we go out into society and we submit to the laws, right? Where we see the speed limit sign and we might not always submit to the speed limit sign, but we see it and we go, okay, I know I'm taking a chance. If I go over the speed limit, I could get pulled over. And if I pull over, I'm submitting to law enforcement, right? We just don't say, you know, the multiple times that I've been pulled over when you've been in the car, I don't say, well, honey, I'm submitting to the police car behind me and I'm submitting to pull over. And as he walks up to the window, hello, officer, I am submitting to you. And I submit to the fact that I must have done something and I agree because I pulled over, right? So we're not using the word submitting constantly, but that's exactly what's happening. You submit on your job, you go to a store and you look at the price on an item and you go up to pay for it. You've submitted to the price. You know, it's not a necessarily even a negative term. You're understanding that's the price and you're deciding you're going to make the deal. You've submitted to the contract of that item being that price and you're going to pay the money and you do it willfully, right? And women like to shop, right?
well,
Maybe we should call shopping submission.
Okay, well, that's a bad corollary.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So what comes to mind is I remember early in our relationship, we talked about, you brought up that what you strive to do along the way with your son is that the parent needs to change the authority from a force or a threat to respect. You know, initially you can discipline a child just because of even the threat, even your voice can be threatening, and
It's fear. They fear.
And they'll submit. But it has to evolve for the relationship to evolve. It has to evolve to respect.
Yeah.
And that's where going back to the other situations that we submit to in life, if we're driving and in traffic, a police officer, even just the social conduct. When we go into an environment, we are submitting to the unspoken ways of being, right? And do we do that? Maybe sometimes you do that out of fear, but not in a really well-managed society. You're doing it because you respect something about the environment, right?
Well, there's common sense, right? If you're in a neighborhood and the speed limit is 30 miles an hour or even 15 miles an hour, most are around 20. You're not thinking, well, I can go 100. There's nobody on the road, you know. And if you do that, you could get a reckless driving ticket. You could even be arrested because it's so much higher above the speed limit. But you use common sense because there might be kids running out. There might be some dogs or animals in the neighborhood running across the road, and So you use your common sense.
Right.
And to me, submission in a marriage, that's why we started out with submitting to your relationship. Submission is common sense. You know, you will say to me, can you take the garbage out? And I'll say, sure, you know, and that's a submission. You don't look at me and say, John, will you submit to me because I need you to carry out the garbage because it's full and it's starting to smell. And I say, yes, Tara, I will submit to you. You know, so when the word gets brought up, people go, because they're thinking submission is a domineering situation. Somebody is above me. They're holding me down. They're submitting me, you know, and it's used in martial arts. We've hashtagged it a few times in our previous video because it's cool to hashtag lots of other things that are popular. And a submission, it causes pain in martial arts. So
more so if you don't submit. You submit once it's starting to cause you pain.
Yeah. People, a lot of times people, in martial arts, in let's say use the UFC or grappling tournaments or even training at your gym, you feel the pain before you submit.
Yeah.
So, and before it gets to the point where you tear something or hurt a joint, you submit. And it's like saying uncle, you know, when you're a little kid. Maybe boys get it more than girls because boys always play these games when they're young, you know, say uncle, you know, you get your brother in a headlock and or whatever, you know, you're holding their face down in the foam pit or the grass or the dirt or wherever you're pushing their head down towards dog poop.
Oh man.
Say uncle, and boys will be like, uncle, you know, they get it right away that the stronger boy is going to win that kind of competition, right? And then there's using your mind and being smart and being clever. And then there's using your words if you're extremely articulate and getting people to submit in those other ways.
So you're illustrating two situations. There's a situation where the two people, the submitor and the submitee, are voluntarily engaging, as in grappling.
Grappling, yep.
And then a scenario where they're not. Maybe the younger brother is not like, hey, yeah, I'd really like
I want to do this. Yeah, no.
So I think, first of all, those are two scenarios.
Yep.
We're talking about in marriage where it's number one, where you're both coming into the scenario agreeing that first of all, you're submitting to the relationship. There we go. That's how so you're like, yes, not that you have to be grappling, but I think it helps to put things in physical terms so that you can see them otherwise. Was I doing I was doing the Talladega Nights. What do I do with my hands? Scenario.
I'm waiting for you to go, save me, baby Jesus.
And so we're assuming number one, you know, first you've submitted to the relationship. So you're essentially in the grappling match saying it's on. And okay, so obviously you're not into it to physically.
Well, I use those examples on purpose because those examples are forceful. So I was illustrating the kind of the negative connotation of submission.
Right. Yeah, I think that's perfect. You know, it's why, you know, not to get too political or anything, that, you know, we've had issues with police issues lately because there isn't this understanding.
What you've been doing, Tara.
Of, you know, initially submitting so that you don't get yourself into trouble, or then also what authority does the policeman or woman have. And so I think they're missing, it seems like step number one is missing there. But we're not talking about that, but I think it's just another situation where you can see, we're assuming in a relationship you already have submitted to the relationship. And for me, the main thing that occurred to me is I have had to like talk myself down out of like getting like, why am I, you know, submission is bad kind of thing, is that, well, if you respect the person, the situation, the environment, whatever, submission is natural.
Well, there were times when you should slide your chair just over a little so that I can look at you a little bit. We'll be fine on camera.
Okay.
There we go. There are times when you said that you didn't trust me. You didn't trust what I was doing because you were like, oh, we don't seem to have enough money, or we don't seem to be moving forward in the way that you thought we should be moving forward, right? And so I understand that there are times, but during those times you were not working, you were not making money. So you had put yourself in a position where you had to submit to me because you were not bringing in money into the household and that type of thing. And I had said, you could stay home if you want and, work on yourself and do fun things, whatever you want to do. But by making that decision, you weren't ready for the feelings that were going to come with it, that the kind of out of control feeling that, comes with not having a source of, your own money you're bringing in or something like that. So you actually submitted automatically. You said, I'm going to submit to this because I'm going to not work, right?
Well, I guess by default, yeah. And yeah. Yep.
Is the video messing you up?
No.
You're like, you seem really off.
Well, we don't pre-plan these too much,
right.
And so
right.
I want to make sure I'm saying what I really do want to say.
Okay.
And so yeah, by default, I was submitting even further in that way, but I think it would have been more comfortable and fine if the finances were more stable. Honestly.
But you weren't ready. You weren't ready to. You didn't understand. First of all, I said this in the last one, and I'll say it again. When a guy says he's going to take care of a woman, there's things that he knows he can guarantee. And I said, I guarantee you'll always have a roof over your head, and you'll always have the best food that I can afford, right? So, but you said in the last podcast too, and this all revolves around submission, right? And not in a bad way. Because I'm submitting to our relationship by committing to take care of you, take care of the things that we need done in our life. There was never a guarantee of phenomenal wealth and, riches beyond compare and trips all over the world and all that kind of stuff. Although, we talked about that type of stuff. It'd be nice to be able to go here and live here or buy this house or do this thing or whatever. And I think that the submission part of it, just using that word, you didn't have any context for it except for negative. There was negative context, right? Because you watched your mom put her foot down and not cook and say, I'm not going to do this and I don't do that and these types of things, right?
Yeah, I remember there being a lot of conflict, and it did not seem like there was enough cooperation to obviously keep a household functioning, but not like things are operating real smoothly and hi honey either way.
No, there was never any family sit down saying, we're going to go through a little bit of a financial tight spot because this is what we're doing. We're building a cabin, we're buying a boat, and the whole family's going to participate. We want, you kids got to help your dad outside on the weekends and pick sticks in the yard and stuff because, whatever. I mean, was there any of that kind of stuff? What I'm trying to get to is why is submission in your original thought, is submission so bad because you're like, because society told you submission was bad, or because it was negative growing up for a woman to even cooperate with a man?
I think it was both. I think the era that I grew up in was definitely about, get a good education, get a good job, not just the era, but, what I was coached to do. But also at the same time, you need to have your own bank account, keep that separate. And I think the underlying sentiment was you can't trust I don't know, a man, a person, the significant other in your relationship. And I think it was in part, growing up with, so my mom was raised in a single parent home. And so I think there innately becomes this feeling of distrust, like if you didn't have a dad that you could count on, then I think innately there becomes, you're raised with a feeling of you can't trust men. They don't provide, they don't stick around, whatever. And so I think that automatically gets ingrained. Mm-hmm. And then also the generation I grew up in is you have to be able to support yourself, which I think as a whole is not a bad thing. Knowing how to take care of yourself and even living on your own for a while is a healthy thing to do. But I think it's also extremely healthy and necessary to be able to live in a partnership, and that's a totally different thing. And I think where things got kind of squirrely in my upbringing is that there was a lot of emphasis on you can't trust a man. And even though my dad was around, was a good provider, we always had a great place to live, food, all the necessities, my mom participated as well in providing for the household. So it's not even that I directly had that feeling, which kind of really makes me feel for the people who grew up in those environments where they directly had the scenarios and the upbringing and the feeling that I can't trust this type of person, man or woman or whatever.
Did you see submission, or did you see cooperation, or did you see resistance, or what subtle things were going on and what gross things were going on?
So oh gosh, I can't remember a lot of it. I can only kind of just go off of feelings, like what the environment was. And, there was, I think, a lot of resistance, my mom submitting to my dad. I think, there was just a lot of resistance. When it came to us kids, it was like, you need to listen to your mother, you need to listen to your father kind of thing. But between them, I think there was always some kind of battle, is what it felt like. And I would imagine that it was tough for my mom to also submit. When you grow up in a family where your dad isn't around and you're not getting any kind of interaction or support, the men that you may see are, well, I think she had uncles that were around for their family. They grew up, so she had examples, but I think when that is your actual upbringing, it wouldn't be natural to want to submit to a man when you see that your mom is the one that's providing for a family of 4 and 5, including her.
And that was your grandma.
That was my grandma. Yeah. That, I heard the phrase a number of occasions, "I am woman, hear me roar." And, what later in life, even as like a later teen, I kind of questioned, and you can hear my hesitancy because it's like I'm processing at the same time.
Take your time.
We're doing this podcast to help, because this is not a unique situation.
And we're on battery on the GoPro. I got at least 6 hours worth of video on the card yet, and with 4K. So
great. We
can see your pores and we can hear you very well. So Good. Take your time.
Good. I'm glad I did my makeup today.
Me too.
So, as an adult, I've strived to, because there were things that happened in my early adulthood when we got together that were abhorrent and absolutely destructive.
There are things that your family did to you. You just said there were things after we got together that were...
I'm sorry. Soon after
It wasn't me. Soon after we got married,
the proverbial SHIT hit the FAN, and
the shite hit the fan. You can say fan.
The shite hit the fan, and I was literally disowned from my family. And it's if the term having the rug pulled out from under you is correct, but still does not emphasize how destructive it is to have your foundation literally taken out from under you as you're stepping into a new life. You still have one foot in a way, and that one foot is always in your family of origin.
Oh yeah, well, it should be.
I think for a healthy family relationship. And so just as I was launching into my own new life, that just was not only taken away, but kind of just chopped off.
Some people keep both feet in their family.
That's true.
And have one hand in their relationship.
Yeah. So,
which is not the submission. You're supposed to leave your family and cleave to your husband, right? And that's the only way you can make it work. And in a lot of indigenous societies, the mother-in-law is not allowed to communicate to the newly married couple.
I'm going to look it up, but I remember seeing that cleave actually means both, has the opposite meanings. To latch on to adhere, and also to split with a sharp instrument. Is that wild that it has both meanings?
Well, maybe it didn't when it was written in the Bible.
Well, it might be inaccurately translated, but
yes.
So I think growing up, I had this feeling like there is not harmony for sure.
Maybe it meant both. Maybe it meant to cut free and to hold on to.
Simultaneously, right?
Kind of like the Hebrew is letters and numbers.
And as an adult, I've strived or striven.
Strove?
No, it's not strove.
Strove.
I heard striven the other day.
I think you strove.
I don't know if it's the same as drive, driven, drove.
I would say it is.
Okay.
I'll look it up.
But we're going off on tangents.
Go ahead.
Okay, let's keep going. So certainly what I saw, what I felt did not feel like harmony. And so that, I would say it was not, or striven, it was not an example, to live by. But it wasn't necessarily conscious. And so when we got together in our relationship, there was this sense of you need to be able to take care of yourself, which I think is a worthwhile thing to teach a young woman or a young man.
It's essential.
Well, literally, it literally is essential. But also, let's take it where your mom's generation, where the environment was much more. Well, yeah, you are going to get married and maybe you have a job for a while, but you'll be depending on your husband. And it was like, what it feels like when you are depending on another person for your well-being, it's like being held in the air. And it's like, sometimes it can feel like you're out here, and sometimes it can feel like you're here, close. And sometimes it's your own perception, because people are afraid of heights no matter what. And sometimes it might be because you're like, you're so afraid you're actually pushing the person away, and you're creating more of an anxiety-ridden experience.
Thank you for the physical contact. I enjoyed it.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to illustrate.
It's one of my love languages.
Because you're like, I don't really understand what you mean by that, what that feeling is inside. And so that feeling inside, when I say even talking about, submit to your husband, is kind of like, I'm encouraging you to be held up and feels vulnerable. That's
when you can submit to something, when you can use logic and you can submit, you are a more rational person. You are seeing the environment that you are in, and you're saying, "Oh, okay, I see my role, right? I see a way that I can participate on this team." Yeah. Let's go there, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody nowadays, almost everybody plays sports, soccer or basketball or whatever. Well, if you're on a team playing your position, you're submitting. You're playing your submission, right? You're not a guard running up and playing center, taking over and pushing that person out of the way, going.
You're submitting to the rules of the game, the structure.
And the position on your team, and your coach, and your other teammates, and that type of. So I don't see the problem. I just see a connotation around the word submission that when it is applied, especially in a marriage, which is the place that it is the most important. It is the most important for a happy, healthy, successful life.
Do you think it always needs to be, it's always most functional when the woman submits to the man?
I'm not going to say the woman has to submit to the man in 100% of everything, but if the man is the leader of the house, there are a lot of, I've seen relationships where the woman is more of the leader in a sense that the woman is more masculine, the woman is more, I would say domineering, because I see that also. And although I'm the leader of our family, I make lots of 98% of the decisions in our life together, we make together. There are decisions, there's lots of things I don't ask you throughout the day. There's lots of things you don't ask me throughout the day. We just go about doing our things. I'm not going, well, look at her, she's out of submission, she didn't ask me. And you're not going, well, yes, he's the leader and he's going to make that decision. We're not saying that kind of stuff because we understand our roles. We communicate, we understand, if there's a major tech problem with the computers that you can't figure out, you call me. And in that sense, you're in submission to my expertise along the lines of technology. And you don't say, John, I have a question and I'm submitting to you. Could you please come up and domineer this topic? That's not what happens. So I think I don't know if it switches. You haven't made more money than me yet, and so there's a potential you could, and I would welcome that.
I hear your dream is to be a kept man.
Because if we make more money, if you make more money, and if you make more money than me, then we make more money together. That's the way I look at it. I don't know. You might flip a switch when you make more money than me, going, "Now I'm the boss." But I would laugh harder than I am right now. I would be like, "Oh, awesome, good. What are we gonna do?" And you'd be like, "I don't know. What would you do?" I see it as our marriage as a business partnership. Yes, we're husband and wife. Yes, we're married. Yes, we're in love and all that. But it is a business partnership, and if we make poor decisions together, if we undermine each other, or if we make poor decisions separately, we're not going to have a successful outcome. We're going to, we might stay in it because we might just be moving and trudging and go, oh man, she did that again. And oh, he did that. Oh, why'd he do that? And we don't talk about it, but then it's weighing us down, right? It's like having all productive people in your company or having 2 productive people in your company and having 8 people that are non-productive, right? Your company's going to go out of business. Your company's not going to survive. So that's the way I look at it.
So you brought up a couple of business examples, and I think what has helped me the most is when these ideas are put into different contexts.
By the way, strove is the correct past tense.
Well, that's the past perfect, I believe. I'm looking, strived is incorrect. Okay. Well, I'm looking for the have. I forget how you say it, but it's like the past.
It was right
past
there.
Past perfect.
It's strove is a verb, namely the simple past tense conjugation of the verb strive.
Yeah, but
to strive is to work hard for something.
Okay. Look up strived or striven. Because there's a different, how we say,
instead of doing an English lesson, I just wanted to.
Okay. Well,
I mean, strove is a proper verb to use.
So it'd be like I drove, but the one I'm looking for is I have driven. Is it striven or strived? So you don't have to look it up now, but
Okay. All right, talk.
Okay, so when you put stuff in these concepts into real life examples, and you take a business context.
Yeah.
I think I'm writing down a list because I'm writing, I think, what is like an order of operation. So you brought up business and you brought up sports.
Yeah.
So in business, it's a given that there is a hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
In sports, there's a hierarchy. There's a coach, there's a team captain or whatever, and then even different positions will have different leadership positions. And same in business, and people don't question that. It's like, I know there's things out there these days about having a horizontal not even hierarchy, a horizontal management or something like that. I can't even use those words.
Yeah, good luck with that.
But we've evolved to select, there's one thing about, having a group meeting and everybody chimes in, right? Because they have their own areas of expertise, but there has to be a decision-making time, and if you're always taking votes, anyways.
Well, a good leader listens to all of the input, okay? Not ad nauseum. You can't listen for 14 days of the same conversation, but a good leader will go to, like, if I'm making a decision about us, I'll say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Do you have any ideas or do you have any opinions, right?
Yeah.
But it can't be a 14-day discussion. Don't know why I'm caught on 14, but it can't be a 14-day discussion about everything, right? But if I first of all, if I need your opinion or if I think the decision I'm going to make is going to affect you, then I will talk to you about it. If I don't think you have the capacity to help with that decision, I won't talk to you. And that's not a put down. I mean, most people probably, oh yeah, you think your wife can't handle that. Yeah, well, there's a lot of things my wife can't handle. There's a lot of things that she doesn't need to handle. There's a lot of things she probably doesn't want to be a part of.
Yeah, there's a point, doing business myself has helped me to really make these things so tangible. Like I was working with our marketing person on something. She's like, well, would you like me to put this out to the group and we'll brainstorm ideas? And I was like, not yet. We need to establish,
sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I said, we're not going to introduce new.
And there we go.
Take two, part two. Okay, so what I was saying is I'm kind of breaking this down, that submission has a structure. And so in business scenarios, let's say sports team scenarios, first of all, you're submitting to that. Let's say you're going to a new job. You're already submitting to that there's going to be this is the company, this is the work environment, this is the pay. There's a certain amount of things that you're automatically agreeing to voluntarily. So again, in submission, we're talking about you've already submitted to the scenario. In sports, this is the game I'm playing, this is the team I'm on, this is the coach, these are the rules. Even if I'm playing softball, not baseball, there's slightly different rules. It's fast pitch, slow pitch. You're all agreeing.
Big ball versus a small ball.
You're all agreeing to these preset rules. And just as a interesting adjunct, Jordan Peterson talks about this a fair amount in child rearing, and that's it's an important step of child rearing is learning to play games. Playing games helps a person to learn. He doesn't say the submission process, but you learn the rules. You learn to cooperate and participate. Mm-hmm. Then what you do is you decide roles. If you're coming into a job, you're obviously already coming into a specific role. And it may develop along the way, but you're also, if you're doing help, you're in customer service, there's a boundary. That you're not doing accounting, let's say. I mean, they're in customer service, you might end up doing some minor accounting, but you're not balancing the company's books.
Right.
And I think this is where I've even had issues in business where the roles, if a person is perfect, this is perfect. If a person is accustomed to being their own do everything kind of person, they have a hard time seeing boundaries. Or maybe they just don't know boundaries well. But I know, for example, it really ticks me off when I've been hired for a job and I mean contracted for a job.
Yeah.
And I have someone checking up on me. And I'm doing, and I don't just mean like, hey Tara, I would like to discuss my project, let's just have a nice update. I mean someone saying, why aren't you doing this? What about that? I need a report on this. And it's like, no, this was not a part. No, your role is to do this and my role is to do this. So they're having a hard time submitting to the work environment, our situation. That's what contracts are for, right?
But you're also having a hard time submitting because if you're contracted, they are essentially your employer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they want to stick their nose into your business while you're contracting for them, they can't do that, you're saying?
To a certain degree. I mean, there's a,
yeah.
Even as an employer, there's a point where you're becoming a micromanager, right? Yeah. And it's not productive.
Well, it wastes time and resources, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so boundaries, also defining roles. And if those aren't clearly defined beforehand, also, that's, like I said, that's where contracts come into play. In a relationship, you may not be what was it? In a relationship, it is important early on to define the roles as well.
So okay, well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What is the number one thing that you've submitted on with me and you?
I don't know. Off the top of my head.
Well, I'm asking you to tell me. Where have you submitted that you've submitted?
Probably for our overall life plan. And
what's amazing to me is you have such you said I had an aversion to it, but you can't even name one thing that you've submitted on. There's none of this terrible submission on the forefront of your mind.
You asked what's the most, and so I'm
that would be
would
be the number one thing. Would be the thing that's on the forefront of your mind, right? The thing that irritates you the most, or the thing that's the biggest submission point.
I think if I had probably a well-structured thought around submission, I'd be able to define it better. It's, I think, still something.
So after 22 years, you don't have a structured definition of your submission in our relationship?
Okay, well, I did tell you, I said I think it's submitting to you planning our overall life journey.
And how have I done that? What are you?
Well, you're you've been the primary breadwinner for all of our marriage. Mm-hmm. And so it's it's not just me saying, well, we're going to move here, we're going to do this, and I'm putting this much into savings, and I'm doing this and that. It's okay, I'm submitting to you being in the driver's seat for that. Okay. And for a number of reasons.
So one thing women should know about men is we exist in reality, right? Women don't like to hear, and you could ask your woman out there, guys, and women, you can tell your man this. Women don't like to hear the reality of it, right? Where a guy goes, I make $45,000 a year, and this is what I can afford. A woman doesn't like to hear that. We're listening to a podcast a week ago or something, and the lady, we're listening to Kevin Samuels, who regretfully has passed away this year. And, boy, I still watch his stuff, and I'm going to miss that guy when I've watched all of his stuff. And I'm like, oh man, no new stuff coming from him.
Yeah.
So
thank goodness he did what he did.
Oh geez, hopefully somebody can pick up the baton. But he's talking to this lady, and he says, would you settle for an average guy? And that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. And settling is not a bad thing either. There's this connotation around submission, there's a connotation around settling, there's a connotation around average. People are already average, even if they don't want to. Average is just the middle. It's the biggest category, and it's the kind of the middle of the road. There's the high achievers, there's the no achievers, the low achievers, and the no achievers, and then there's the largest swath of population, people making 35 to 200,000 a year, and all of that in between. And so he says, would you settle for let's say a plumber making 55,000 a year? And she's like, well, yeah, of course, if I was in love with him and I was attracted to him. But after I got with him, he wouldn't be average. He would be, I'd push him to start a business and have his own plumbing business and all this and that.
Yeah.
And I'm wiggling in my chair because she was all wiggly and doing that. And he's like, slow your roll, lady. He's like, so you're saying you would take this guy, but then you would start haranguing him and harassing him, because women don't like reality. Even if there's never any chance of making one more penny a year, they don't want to accept what they have. They don't want to be happy and satisfied. As soon as they're satisfied, they're bored. And then, and it's not just me saying that. There's lots of other people saying that, and there's lots of evidence for that, right? And a guy will say, well, this is what I make. This is what I make right now. Yeah, I'd love to get a raise. I'd love to do this. I'd love to do that. But all these other things are going on I got to take care of. Now, I'm a different kind of guy, right? I'm like, okay, I'm going to make an extra a certain amount of money here, and I'm going to put it into this, which hopefully will become something bigger that can make me more money. And that's the kind of guy I am, and that's it. And it took you quite a while to learn that. And there was no submission needed. I never asked for submission. You wanted to be with me. And so we started living our life together. We got married very quickly, and we started growing in our marriage together. And I just kept doing the things that I do, because I did go back into machining and started a company, and I wanted to make money because I was in martial arts, and there's not a lot of money in martial arts. Back then there wasn't. Now, if I had a gym because of things like the UFC, I'd probably make a better income in martial arts. Social media? My goodness. Yeah, we didn't even have social media when I had my martial arts school.
It was going to the town square and demoing.
Which was 22 years ago.
Yeah.
And
getting yelled at.
And putting up flyers and saying, what are you doing out there? Because we'd be doing demos with weapons and stuff, and so the police would drive by real slow and be like, martial arts training, guys, that type of stuff. But I just kept doing what I was doing. So I wasn't trying to hold down our lifestyle, which you kind of acted like I was trying to do. Well, I don't have any say on where this money goes and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but if I don't do this with the money, there's not going to be more money in the future. There's going to be a standard, okay, let's put 10 or 15,000 a year in savings, and then in 4 years we'll have 60,000 maybe dollars, and then we'll have, that type of thing. I wasn't into that. Mm-hmm. I'm still not into that. I'm into making things ramp up really fast, having a big score, being able to do something with that money, and hopefully turning it into more money.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing a lecture on this podcast about buying a house, but buying a house, you don't make money off of it unless you have a business in it. Now with your business, we can make money, and at the home, right? Because you work on your computer, you have a home office, you have all that kind of stuff. So
we have a studio.
Yeah,
obviously.
Studio.
So I think a great advantage and disadvantage in the beginning of our relationship is that I was so young. I was basically 19 when we got married. And so I had a lot of life experience compared to most kids my age, but like no life experience as far as, adult life experience. And so as far as, I think guys in general, yes, do live in reality more. And it seems kind of just like an innate thing, but certainly the more that you get into life as a man or a woman, you do have to exist within it. And there are men and women who behave differently. Those who don't exist within reality are likely running up credit card debts. And actually, this is why I didn't go to college, because I looked at reality and I was like, okay, so how much am I going to be financing? Mm-hmm. And how much would I likely make coming out of college? So I did have more reality concepts in that sense. But as far as business ownership, entrepreneurship, that was like totally foreign. Yeah. And so you spending money to make money did not make sense to me. It took a long time for that to make sense. And so that made that particularly difficult. I hear in these podcasts that we've talked about, like the women calling into Kevin Samuels and so forth, not really, what I don't understand is the women who are adults not really living in reality, because of course they have to be supporting themselves to some degree. Because for me, what really helped to ground the reality was, of course, just getting into life more, more years down the road, getting into business, and having those experiences for myself, having literally the experiences, kind of being treated like a husband in a way, in business, like where's the money, and I'm not understanding. Okay, so in the past I would have been to you, hey, I thought you were doing this business, where's the money kind of thing. Oh. I thought this was going to, turn out this much or whatever. Yeah. And then in business, having that literally like turned around on me, and it's like, wait a minute, we're partners in this, this is not just me printing out money, in a situation. And which business are you talking about? My media. Okay, business. So you're speaking a little more colloquially and not differentiating which ones you're talking about. So okay. I'm confused. So I can imagine people listening are going to be like, what is she talking about now? So we have two businesses. Yeah. I have a machine shop, a long-standing, I've been in the trade for 33 years now, and my machine shop I've owned under the name it is now for 7 years, and the previous company, the previous name, so I've been in business over 15 years now. Before I forget again, though, sure. I think this is when we hear about the high-value men and have high-value women, and if you want a high-value man, do you want him 20 years down the road when he's already established and he has his top pick of women? Or are you going to grow with your high value man? Are you going to be there from the beginning? And I think that's what we've done, I've done is I perceived you before I knew of this term as a high value man. And I didn't know it, but what I was deciding to do was develop with you. I didn't really see any other way. That was just kind of, to me, the thing that you did is you marry the person and you're going to become the best that you can be together. Well, it's kind of funny. I don't see myself as a high value man, because I don't think guys that are technically what they would call high value look at themselves that way. It could be. We look at ourselves. We don't ascribe grandeur to ourselves. We look at what we're doing and we look at what we can do, and we do as much as we can, and then we try to do more than we think we can, and we try to leverage. We're building. First thing we do is build a foundation, and then we start to put blocks on that foundation, and then we start to use the levers and pulleys and cranes to get everything up higher and higher. And we try and build our base, broad and wide so that it's stable. And we build bridges in life. We build relationships with people
not necessarily people that can help you, but people that you can learn things from. You know, and I have several mentors, and you know, and I call them for different things, and a lot of them don't even know they're mentors of mine. You know, I just call them when I need to talk about certain things, and they are topics that they're knowledgeable about, and they're topics that they're interested in.
Yeah.
So I've strategized, instead of going to people and saying, will you be my mentor? I just see somebody that's good at something, and I build a bridge, develop a relationship, and then I can talk to them about that.
Right. So I think we both got more motivated. We already did nearly 100 podcasts before we listened to a number of these newer relationships. Maybe you listened earlier, but I started getting into them. We were already but we became extra motivated to do this podcast and talk about these topics, hearing about the conversation that's going on out there, and where we felt that we could really contribute is growing in high value together. You know, instead of just like aiming for Prince Charming or the damsel in distress, or, you know, your prince or princess, developing together, because that's going to be the majority of cases and situations. And it's not about badgering the other person into being better. You have to, first of all, submit to the relationship and develop your own. You know, I did early on decide to submit to you. It was pretty early on, actually, even though inside, it's kind of like when you see those, maybe like a video of a kid who's just like, they're resisting doing something, even though they're really, but they're choosing. They know they need to eat the broccoli to get the cake. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And
so you were choking it down to get the reward.
Yeah. I'm like, I know the reward's going to be there someday.
No, we developed our process in our life, and we've talked about it for years, and then we started our podcast, and we have our 10 marital arts, the top 10 things you do naturally when you're in a marriage, and if you're doing it correctly, they'll fall into place. And over time, I consume a lot of content online. I listen to a lot of things, and I started coming across these people who are talking about relationships. It might have been because of the, you know, your phone listens, right? So me and one of my guys were talking about handheld laser scanners the other day, and all of a sudden the next day an advertisement for laser scanner showed up on my phone, and I didn't do any searches on laser scanners, so I know the phone is listening. Yeah. So maybe relationship things showed up in my feed because we are talking about it, right? And so I just started clicking on them and listening and hearing lots of good information mixed in with a lot of really awful opinions, you know, and I'm like, so, and so I started sharing some of them with you, and I show you little clips and I'd laugh about things, and
they were like, boy, maybe we should be Uncle John and Auntie Tara.
Right. And then we are Uncle John and Auntie Tara to lots of people, lots of younger people and some adults. But I'm like, you know, there's no way to put out the quintessential perfect plan, right? Because everybody's different. Everybody's at a different level. Yeah. I do hear the term high value, and I don't want to be called high value because a lot of young men are running around now saying they're high value. Yeah. It's kind of like when we've been down to a college in Iowa many times to talk to the entrepreneurial class. They called me up one time and said, hey, I want you to come and talk to, the professor called and said, I want you to talk to my class. And I'm like, about what? You know, well, entrepreneurship. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You know, I laughed. I laughed about it because that guy met me in a talk I was giving about manufacturing. Yeah. And he came up and introduced himself, and he said, oh, you're a great speaker, this and that and the other thing. And I was like, oh, thanks, you know. And I'm a professor at this college. I'm going to give you a call about coming and talking to my class. And I'm like, oh, cool. You know, didn't think anything of it. But then we go to talk to these kids in an entrepreneurial class, you know, and they're 19, 20, you know, years old, and they're seniors getting out of school, 21 maybe, I suppose. And I'm like, wow, you're at the last year in college, you're at the end of your college training, for the most part, and you're now taking an entrepreneurial course. This isn't going to work. And I'm saying this so maybe parents are listening. There's a reason the college won't teach your kids entrepreneurship at the beginning of their college career.
I don't know, maybe the parents petitioned the college not to offer that class until later.
Well, there's a lot of money being spent that doesn't need to be spent. Yeah. Because college does not set you up to be an entrepreneur. College sets you up to be an employee, to work in a corporation and have a schedule, and they make you feel good by giving you a degree and saying, oh, you accomplished that. Good. Now you can come and work for us. And then you look at your college debt and it's like, holy cow. I've got $80,000, $100,000 worth of debt, and I'm working and I'm making $45,000 a year if you're lucky, right out of college.
Yeah.
So anyway, we went through that kind of structure, and I'm listening to these things, and it's like people saying entrepreneurial. You see that everywhere now. I don't even call myself an entrepreneur. I'm a try to get it done guy, right? And if I accomplish something, that's great. I add that to my building block, and then I move to the next thing I'm not good at, and then I work on that. And once I get that down and that's successful, that's another building block, and then I move to the next thing. And that's how you become successful in anything, in life, in marriage, in relationships, in friendships, in business, in computers, in language, in music, in martial arts. You have to learn the footwork before you can learn how to punch. Otherwise, you can't deliver that punch in martial arts, right? So anyway, our marital arts, our number one is patience. I said it wrong the other day. I said number one is communication. Number two is patience.
I didn't even catch you.
I know. No. So number one is patience, and number two is communication. But I don't like the term high value. High value man.
What I saw was potential. I knew before I met you, there was a feeling of an energy that I was looking for. And later I was able to identify it as potential. And I think that's maybe what's missing in so many of these callers or young women that we see on the panels. They want the potential already manifested. And in the majority of cases, you're going to need to meet early on, start out together, submit to the relationship, decide what your roles are, which create the boundaries, so you're not stepping on each other's toes, or and I even, it was joking but kind of serious. A year ago we were at the accountant's, and I said, on behalf of all women, I'd just like to apologize to you guys for women hounding on their men about money.
Yeah.
And I gotta go back. So because it's knowing your roles, right? And I think that's what was. Well, and then I keep forgetting to mention, I wrote down process. Then you can know what your process is. You have a system within your household and your family. But if you're constantly fighting about roles and boundaries, or even if you haven't submitted to your relationship yet, the roles, you're submitting then to each other. And I think there needs to be a primary hierarchical person in the family that's being submitted to. I think most of the time it works well to have that's the man. He can most men most of the time can think more rationally, in reality. Yes, I'm saying
men
that.
think more rationally. I'm writing this down.
Yes. Well, I think overall, and for the most part, there's always exceptions. And you get bad relationship dynamics, and neither are thinking rationally at all. But I think this is, so going back to, let's say, your parents' generation, where it was not even assumed, it was just part of the environment where there was this hierarchy. This was the, dad, mom, kids, and a number of people in that generation also would put God first.
I was going to say back then it was God, family, and then work.
right? And when you put things into perspective like that, you take so much work out of the equation. Like my reference was being micromanaged. If you already have decided on your roles and hence your boundaries, then you don't feel like you need to be checking up on someone all the time if you're a reasonable person. And you learn along the way. I saw you write down, when is the best time to submit? I think in the beginning, as early as possible, start hashing those things out, because as you then have to get into life together, your roles are more defined, your boundaries, who's taking care of what, you get so much clearer, and then your process in life goes so much smoother, right?
Yeah. Well, so there's another thing that we should say that I think is very important, is knowing what you can't live with. And a lot of times people think that they have to go to college to learn about life. What I think needs to happen is, as soon as you're legally capable of getting a job, and I think before that, but I mean, you can work around the neighborhood, you can mow lawns, you can shovel, you can do different things, rake leaves, you can do tasks for people in the babysitting, you can walk dogs, you can, take care of cats, you can house sit. There's so many things you can do as a younger person, 14, right. 15 years old. And in a lot of states, you can't work till you're 16, so you can't get an official job, a W-2 job. But, if you work a job as soon as you can, you're going to learn very early what you don't like, right? And that's where you work fast food. That's where you work at a gas station. That's where you work at a car wash. That's where you work at a restaurant. You work at all these, what I would say are more service work, so that you learn what you like and what you don't like. And you also learn how to work with people. You're also going to meet different people that are not maybe in your class in high school, and not just getting stuck with the same group of people, moving around in the same circles, and you don't think there's much opportunity.
Well, it can be helpful. I cleaned hotel rooms for a good couple of years, and you get to see adults working certain jobs and what their life or lifestyle is like, and you're like, okay, do I want to keep doing this? It can be very motivating too.
Right. Do you need to, or you saw yourself. So I worked in I'll talk about me. I worked I think I had 20 jobs before I got professional, right? Before I decided to choose a career. And I found myself rising up in the ranks very quickly. I went from dishwasher to chef in a year and a half. And that sounds crazy. I didn't go to school to be a chef. What I did is, my chef, I worked at a restaurant that had a chef. He would plan, and sometimes he would cook, but most of the time he was planning in the kitchen. The cooks and everybody was doing everything. And he decided to take a couple years off and sit in his office and smoke weed. And so he told me, you're planning so I was dishwasher, then I was prep cook, then I was a cook, and then I had great skill in the kitchen, and I had the ability and the desire to manage multiple things. So everything from baking to cooking the roast, to prepping vegetables and fruits, to making sauces and salad dressings and all this type of stuff, and then doing massive amounts of things for banquets. And so I was cooking for 100 to 200 people at a time, sometimes 2 different banquets. They had a large banquet hall, multiple rooms at a banquet hall. And I wasn't a line cook. I didn't cook for the restaurant, so I wasn't doing burgers and fries and all that kind of stuff. I was doing banquets.
So they kind of had different divisions?
Yeah, it would have been turkeys or lots of chicken, or roasts, and basic meat and potato, weddings and anniversaries and business things and stuff like that. So he just said, you're going to handle everything, and I'd run the menu by him, and most of the time the people doing the wedding, they'd request what they wanted, And so I just run the whole thing and cook too. But that showed me that I didn't want to work in a restaurant long term, you know, for the rest of my life. But I also gained skill and I climbed the ladder relatively quickly. And even in the middle of all of it, when, you know, I'm overseeing the entire kitchen, I was still helping with dishes. I would still help prep cook. You know, I was, and so what it showed me early on was that I had, everybody thinks they're a leader, or they think they have management capability, or they think, you know, and most people nowadays, they don't learn until they get out into the field. They're 25, 30 years old, and they get a middle management position, and maybe they rise up the ranks in management, but they don't know that if they're really good at it until they get in that position. You know, and I knew when I was 19, you know, 18, 19, I knew that I could manage 6 or 7 people and run a large production in a business and account for everything, keep track of stock. You know, I would get on the computer in the spreadsheet and I would say we just went, you know, we used 2 gallons of mayo for making dressings. So I'd put it in the order category and I'd do all this stuff. And it was primitive. You know, most of the time I was writing it down on a sheet on a clipboard and then inputting it later into the computer, because the computers were relatively, I mean, they were rudimentary back then. I mean, when I was 19, that was a while ago. 30.
Well, you probably
32
had to go
years ago.
To a special room that had that.
Oh yeah. There was the computer room. The office had the computer in it. So yeah. So, you know, keeping track of vegetables. You know, if we went through, you know, 2 bins of lettuce, then we had to get lettuce on order that day. You know, and you keep your walk-in freezers stocked and all that kind of stuff. And before I had that job, I worked as a manager. I worked at a Taco John's, and I ended up making shift manager in about 4 or 5 months. And then I was doing the same thing. I was ordering stock. I was keeping the walk-in refrigerator and freezer stocked. You know, and we had to prep vegetable. Back then, you cooked all the burger, you prepped all the vegetables at a Taco John's. You know, it didn't come pre-cut. You know, lettuce heads came as heads of lettuce. It wasn't shredded already. So yeah, I learned. I worked at a gas station. I worked at a car place where we had to, you know, the cars would come in so dirty, and you had to tear the panel out of the door, and you had to clean all the grooves, and there's just some nasty, disgusting stuff in cars when people don't care anymore. You know, the pop getting spilled down the vents on the dash and all that. So you had to tear apart the car and wash it, and you know, that kind of stuff. I realized I didn't want to do that. You know, so I think knowing what you can't live with, you know, getting yourself a job early on. To parents, I mean, I know I'm going on, and most people probably don't want to listen to all this, but man, you know, let your kids get a job, or at least get them out there to get a job. They start earning money. They learn the value of their time. They get praises. They get criticisms. They get put down. They might even get bullied, and that can be a good thing. You know, you can learn a lot by having someone who's giving you crap when you don't want any crap given to you, and that's okay, because that's real life. I'd rather have somebody do something to my face than, you know, pee in my coffee, you know, or do something to my food in the refrigerator. You know, I'd rather have somebody come and bully me to my face so that I can deal with it, you know. So yeah.
What do you think would be some good wrap-up points? I think we've you know, without pre-planning this, we're killing it. I think we came to a number of good points.
Yeah.
I'll tell you some of my highlights. That there's first of all a choice point. When we're talking about submission, we're not talking about forcing submission, even though we use the martial arts analogy. We're talking about, first, you're submitting to your relationship, and so you're agreeing to the scenario, like you agree to playing a certain sport.
Yep.
And then,
well, let's stop there for a second. That's the way it works, is relationship first, because otherwise you wouldn't be in it if you're not going to submit to the relationship, right? And then the wife submits to the husband, or the female submits to the male at a certain level. and then the male can submit to the female.
Which is next.
It doesn't go the other way. I mean, at least I'll tell you this, at least with real guys, with real men, it doesn't go that way. Because if the woman does not submit, the man will never trust her.
Well, interesting how she has to like trust and submit first.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's like the first. This was another thing. I was talking about old time relationships, right? Where it was just a given. That was just how everybody was raised. It was God, family, and community kind of thing. Yeah. But also, I mean, how many times had we heard? We had aunts in that generation. Your parents are in that generation where the man dies and like the woman doesn't know doesn't know how to pay the bills, doesn't know how to take care of this and take care of that. So I do think, I try to see there is a reason why, I was taught, for example, learn how to take care of yourself, know about these things. When I ask you a question like, okay, where's our money being invested? I need to know the passwords. It's so that, if something were to happen to you, that it's not lost in probate or or just trying to get passwords for a year. And so
all my passwords are the same. I'm awesome because I have all the money.
Okay.
That's my password.
Well, good. Glad everybody knows that. There's respect versus fear or threat. And where I'm assuming the reason I can say, I think in most cases, it is the woman submitting to the man, because I'm assuming that it is you respect him. So if you don't respect him, why are you with him?
There's that.
So this is like a hierarchy to me, like a list of reasons, right? I got down to it that for me it is about feeling vulnerable. So even though it can be hard for me to say, yes, I submit to my husband. Yes, I believe that in the majority of cases it should be the wives submitting to the husbands. That it's because it's very vulnerable. It feels very vulnerable. Whereas in older generations, I think there was a sense of security. It was the opposite, where if you were on your own, that felt way more vulnerable than I've got a great guy and we can make this happen together, and so I think that's really significant, and I'm still addressing these things within myself. Submitting early, I think the earlier the better. And because you're going to have to start hashing out these other things, like what are your roles, what are the boundaries, and then developing the process. Let's see, choosing to submit, already had that, and growing together. That it's going to be a rare case if we use the current terminology of high value. It's going to be a rare case to just find someone out of the gate, who's already high value, making that income, the Prince Charming, or let's just say the Prince Charming. Most people, you're going to be growing together. What's your summary? What are your summary points, or do you want to?
Well, okay. So at the end of this, hopefully the people that got upset listening to this listen to the end, right?
Yeah.
Because I trust you, and I would trust you running my business. I'd trust you running your business. If something happened to me, you'll be taken care of, because we have income flow, income streams, and you will have to do things. You'll have to pay attention to things, but the way we've set it up, and if something happens to you, I can run your business. I can, I know what's going on. I'm part of the meetings, that type of thing sometimes, and I know what's up. I think that would not happen. I would not trust you if you were just always in my face trying to tell me the things I'm doing wrong. And I think that's the number one thing in submission is trust and respect and believing in the person you're with. I mean, if you don't believe in the guy you're with, you shouldn't be with him, first of all. Mm-hmm. Just like if you don't believe the woman you're with, you shouldn't be with her. And if you believe in him, you need to step back a little bit and give him space to become. You know, if you believe in that potential and you see that he has potential, let him realize it. The more responsibility that is turned over to a man, a real man, a weak man will sit around and mope and cry and blubber about it. A real man will take the mantle of authority that comes along with responsibility and will walk forward with it. He might not be going as fast as you think you want him to, but maybe you shouldn't be driving a Range Rover. Maybe you should be driving a Chevy. You know, maybe you should not be pushing for a Gucci purse. Maybe you should be okay with buying a purse at Target or Walmart or something until you can actually have money to put in it after you buy it.
Yeah.
You know, I know there's a lot of talk about that. You know, you buy a Gucci purse, but you don't have any money left over to put in it, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, just like a guy, you know, he shouldn't be buying a bass boat and be out on the lake if he's not providing for his family. You know, he shouldn't have a family if all he wants to do is fish and not provide for his family. So, you know, and I think that's probably the best way to go is, you know, trust your man, is, you know, and give him a couple of years. I mean, you can't be like, well, you didn't develop anything in 6 months, I'm done with you. You know, because you're probably, you know, kissing off the best relationship you're ever going to have. If you choose somebody because you see that they have the capabilities to do things, but then you're in their face constantly about doing it, they're not going to do it. You know, most guys are going to be like, you know, if I make something of myself, she's such a biatch, she's just going to divorce me and take half. And then the guy won't work for it. You know, he won't work to build that empire that you think that he can do. So I think that's the biggest takeaway is, you know, believe in your significant other, and it goes both ways, you know? So. Yeah.
Well, we go on and on, we will in future podcasts, but I think this is a good one to summarize that, yes, I will say it, even though you got to overcome it. Absolutely, submit to your man. I love and respect you, and that's why I can, and I do.
Yeah, well, you took a chance. Good job.
Okay, I have to say the whole thing. I love and respect you, and absolutely saw the potential and that I could trust you. And I've had to get over my own stuff, remind myself that you're absolutely worthy of submitting to. Well, it's good and better for us.
There wasn't anything I was doing to make you doubt. You know, you had doubts because you would read into everything. You'd be like, well, okay, he just spent, once you learned how much money I was spending on business, you were wondering then about ROI. What's the return on investment here? And that's probably a whole nother podcast.
It is. But I had doubts based upon my own insecurities.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Misunderstandings.
Yes.
And it's still not always comfortable, I'll say.
It's not always comfortable for me. You know, the things that I have to do in order to grow my business or to push it in. You know, a business is a ship, and you can't just change course, you know, and if you do change course, it takes a while, and then it's going in a different direction, and you may not have seen that iceberg because you're let's say I was listening to my wife saying, you got to make more money. Oh, I got to make more money. Okay, I should take this job because I can make more money. And it's like, oh no, I shouldn't have took that job. I missed all of the red flags with that company because my wife was pushing on me, and I was getting all flustered, and I was listening and freaking out because she was freaking out, and now I just did a job that I'm not getting paid for, or I just did a job and now I'm getting sued, or I'm, you know, whatever's going on, right? And so you've got a ship moves very slowly, you know, and turns very slowly, and it's better that way, you know, that you don't make quick, fast, irrational decisions. And if you didn't trust me, or you didn't settle down enough to trust me, if I took on your mistrust energy, I would make bad decisions. And I was never willing to do that. You know, throughout our relationship, I would say, I understand what you're saying, but here's what I'm doing and here's why. And guys, I had to say that thousands of times in 22 years. I've said that thousands of times, that this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. Here's what's going on. Here's what I see. Here's what I'm working towards. Here's, and it took many years for you to adapt to that, because you were raised around frantic lack. Like, there wasn't enough money, so there was complaining. There was, you were raised around people that wanted to do things. They either couldn't do it or they could do it, but they were frantic about money. Either way. And I'm not that way. And so it took years. And good relationships have difficult conversations, and good relationships take time. And it's just, so that's my input for now.
I think a good extra conclusion would be, what is the feeling? What is the difference between when I'm submitting? How does it feel different as opposed to when I'm not?
It's heavy. It's heavier, right? When you trust me and when you leave the responsibility up to me, it is a heavier load. I can feel it. But I'm also energized. I'll have to think about that. It's a good question. I'm very, it's almost like I'm supplied with extra energy, extra knowledge, extra get up and go, because I do want to see you happy. I do want to see you pleased. And when you let go of that pressure you're putting on me and say, we're talking about something and we come to a conclusion that we're going to do something, and a large portion of it is on me, and I agree, and I see that you're like, well, that will be really great, and I go, yeah, well, and we can both see that we can do it, and then I need to do that. The accomplishment is a great feeling, but it's also, I have the space and the time to do it properly, to make sure that I'm not building a foundation on sand, right? And so overall, it almost feels like the way it's supposed to happen, which brings my manhood forward, my manness out, that, okay, I got to do this, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm doing it. Maybe I have to buy tools, maybe I have to pull on a relationship I have outside of our family. Maybe I have to, maybe I have to save some money, or maybe I have to get a loan or get some money, maybe I have to utilize my skills, in different ways. And that's all part of the adventure of life, the intriguingness of being in a relationship, doing something that satisfies your spouse, that kind of thing.
We've never really talked this in depth about submission and my feelings. I mean, I guess we have much earlier in particular, but it was a different kind of conversation. So this is the first that I've really, even for myself, gone so deep into how I feel, even about talking about it, Is there anything that surprised you, or what are your thoughts about what I expressed, how it feels inside of me still?
Well, okay, so here's one thing that I was fighting. You wanted to put in some different flooring, right? You want to put in some faux hardwood floor, some of this manufactured flooring, right?
Well, I'm trying to keep it reasonable in price.
Well, okay. So you wanted, and I'm resistant to it. I'm still a bit resistant, because in my mind I'm going, well, that's going to cost a lot. And you're like, and you didn't know how much it's going to cost. And I couldn't give you an exact number either. I just knew it was going to be more than we wanted to spend. But at some point, I just said, all right, I'll get the guy out here and I'll quote. And I saw you shift. I saw you go, oh, yeah, he's moving forward, right? And so then we got the quote, and you were like, that's a lot of money. And I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of money. You got to decide what you want, and so and I was resistant to painting, right? You were like, well, I want this color. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, I don't even look at the walls. Who cares? You know?
I'm like, well, you're not here all day.
Yeah. So now I know what you do all day. Just stare at the walls.
Just staring at the walls. I'd just rather watch paint dry, John.
So, then we redid the bathroom. We put in a tub in a bathroom that was just a half bath and a soaking tub and painted, the walls were painted the color you wanted. And I saw what that did for you. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that works. It's a good thing. So, I mean, that type of thing is neat to see. And if you're working with your spouse in that way, you got to find ways to do it that you can afford or that is within the price range you want to spend, right? I mean, we could afford more, but you have to evaluate, is it worth tens of thousands of dollars putting into your home, because you can or because you want to? Should you do it? These are business decisions to me. There's a lot of things I could buy for my company that I don't.
My question
But I could utilize them and they could even make me money, but I still say I'm not going to do that.
My question was, I don't think either of us were as aware of how much this topic of submission is still like, there's so much, I think, underneath programming, but I'm consciously overcoming it. Did anything surprise you? And would there be any tips for guys or ladies out there from what?
I think the surprising thing to most people is going to be how layered everything is. That for me, it's mostly a money thing, and it's not even a money thing if I can or I can't. Like if I do or I don't have the money, it's the spending of the money and what it brings. Now, the spending of that money for you might bring a lot of satisfaction, a lot of calm, a lot of peace, a lot of accomplishment, something like that. It doesn't for me. And I know I'm talking about submission still, but it's a layer. Submission has a surrender layer. Submission has a acquiescing layer. Submission has a money layer. Submission has a pride layer. Submission has a trust layer. Submission, there's all these layers in that word and how you interacted in a relationship. That's why we have our 10 marital arts. All of these bring submission to each other and in proper hierarchical nature, primarily for our relationship. But there's a lot of people that are acting as man and wife, man and woman, So.
Well, I think it would have been even harder if growing up, I think there was definitely a submission to the father role. And if I can see if there isn't a father or a father role around, that would make it just infinitely more difficult.
Well, you said it. It's hard to trust. It's like the innate idea is that men don't stick around. Mm-hmm. The innate idea is that
if that was what you grew up with,
for some reason, even though your mom made a baby with that guy, now your dad was around the whole time, but even though, if you're raised by a single mother and you're a child, your subconscious is saying there was something wrong with the man because he's not here. And so even though your mom chose to make a baby with him, the other qualities of a parent aren't there, and that's disastrous. That's a disastrous thing. And I'm not going to justify, well, some people grow up really good and whatever. It doesn't matter. A mother can't be a father and a father can't be a mother. It doesn't work like that.
Yes. So and I think I'm grateful for how I grew up because I'm happy with the person I turned out to be. And there's lessons in so many things in life. They're gonna come out some way. But it just I think helps me to have greater compassion for those who grew up in a family that did not have a mother and father around all the time, because definitely at least seeing some example, seeing
Yeah,
them
and you're
around.
being a woman. You have compassion. I don't. I'm saying you are so far behind. You need to update yourself. Yeah, if you're raised in a single parent scenario, you need to learn.
Absolutely.
You need to, at a younger age, you need to be studying relationships. You need to be learning how the world works, because you're not shown how the world works. You're not shown how normal relationships are.
Yeah.
So
no, I totally agree. Yeah, that there's that also.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe is this also being extra grateful for the portion of the example I did have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't completely void.
Yeah.
So should we
there
wrap
you
it
go.
up?
There you go. We can.
Otherwise, we're going to go on more tangents. All right.
Later.
Love you.
Love you too.